Oscar, you're into fashion, right?
I mean, I really like cosplay and TikTok outfits inspired by anime. I think that's fashionable.
I think that counts. But you know Vogue magazine, right?
Oh, sure. My mom had a subscription my entire life. I pretty much only see the cover, and I know that the lady who runs it has a movie based on her, right?
Oh yeah, The Devil Wears Prada. Classic Mero. Well, did you know that only one black photographer has ever shot one of the covers for Vogue, and it was in 2018?
Really? In 16 years?
Wait, do you think Vogue magazine has only been around for 16 years?
Well, that's my whole life.
Okay, that's a fair point. However, Vogue has been around for over 127 years.
What? And they've only had one black photographer shoot the cover? That doesn't seem right.
Shocking, right? Well, let me tell you about a photographer from Ghana who had found a lack of black photographers in his new photo book and magazine collection, and he's making big moves to change it.
Did you say new photo book and magazine collection?
I sure did. Let me explain. In 2020, during the George Floyd protest, a conversation was sparked industry-wide among black photographers. The coverage of the protest was mostly shot by white photographers, causing many black photographers in the industry to wonder why their stories weren't being covered by black photojournalists. During such an important and painful historical moment when the world was really seeing African Americans struggle so clearly, people were frustrated by the lack of representation. In a 2020 interview with Aperture.org, Danielle Scruggs, a Chicago-based photo editor at Vox, said, "We need to hire more black photographers. We need to hire more black photo editors, not only to cover things like protests and uprisings and things that only pertain to black communities. We need more black photographers doing food stories, more black photographers doing culture stories and fashion stories. It shouldn't just be for hard news. It should be for everything. It should be across the board." Meanwhile, during the COVID-19 lockdown, a New York-based photographer, Paul Ninson, who is from Ghana, took advantage of low prices on books and began to collect African photography books. He too was struck by the lack of representation behind the camera and wondered how the subjects of the photos would feel about the way they are being represented. Ninson began to collect as many books as he could find and is making an effort to not only showcase African and black photography, but also to inspire a new generation of black and African photographers. Let's take a closer look.
In a New York storage unit, Ghanaian photographer Paul Ninson is sorting through photography books and decades-old National Geographic magazines. This is just a fraction of the 30,000 African photo books he has collected, with which he intends to open Africa's largest photographic library.
My way through photography was just looking at magazines and photography books. Some of these pictures are incredible. Some of these pictures tell stories of places, but mostly sometimes what I wonder is, what if those people in those communities contribute to these stories in a way of self-expression of who they are? Do people in these communities accept how they are being depicted, especially the Africans?
Ninson began collecting shortly after arriving in New York on a photography scholarship in 2019. While most New Yorkers were staying at home during the global health crisis, he was sifting through storage containers and struggling bookshops, working odd jobs and taking out personal loans to cover the costs of his obsession. He believes he's amassed the world's largest collection of African photography books.
I was constantly emailing people, constantly emailing galleries, collections, private collectors, and telling them my vision and what I want to do.
When his friend Brandon Stanton discovered what Ninson was doing, he promoted it on his blog alongside a crowdfunding campaign. That blog is the world-famous Humans of New York, and the campaign raised $1 million in a single day. Next month, Ninson returns to Ghana's capital, Accra, where 18,000 of his books have already been shipped. There he plans to build the Decan Center, a museum and learning institution where aspiring African photographers can take workshops, rent equipment, and access studio space.
Sometimes people see somebody like me differently. Why? Because the narrative which has been perpetrated for years has eroded in the people's mind, and that is what is affecting my country and my Africa and people like me. Why? Because we've left the space for so long for people to tell their stories and distribute their stories. And that is what I want to be able to fill that, give the tools and the resources two African photographers and two Black people to be able to tell our stories.
Wow, that's pretty rad.
I know, right? It's inspiring that he spent lockdown creating a whole library of photojournalism. It's going to build a Black photography museum to inspire and promote telling African stories.
Yeah, makes me feel like I could have done more than just rewatch all of Dragon Ball Z during the pandemic.
Don't feel bad, Oscar. We still got time. We are the future generation that gets talked about all the time. It's in the name of the show.
Oh my gosh, you're right, Trenton.
We still got time for Dragon Ball Z and changing the world.
Wicked.